We're in the Museum Batteria Vettor Pisani. This is a coastal battery built before the First World Conflict for the defense of the city of Venice. After the restoration in 2017, it became Museum of the First World War. This is the fourth presentation of a series of 5 meetings called The Great War in a Nutshell. Today's presentation is about propaganda. Propaganda, a great instrument of persuasion. The period of the First World War marked a turning point in the history of propaganda. In the 20th century, because of demographic, socio-economic and political developments, the propaganda assumed a greater volume than in the past. When the war broke out alongside the military mobilization, there was a great political and media mobilization. Satirical cartoons, conceptual metaphors, persuasion, the texts were brief, the language easy to understand and remember, the use of images gave immediacy to the message. The systems studied for the propaganda in the wartime constituted a testbed for the new communication strategies. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, the propaganda is a dissemination of information, facts, arguments, rumors, half-truths or lies to influence public opinion. In order to influence the opinions and behaviors of the public, they tried to make the most of the potentialities of the means of communication available. The press, above all the one illustrated, had an active role thanks to the already consolidated popularity of some newspapers, as La Domenica del Corriere, La Tribuna Illustrata, a weekly magazine published in Rome since 1890, and L'Illustrazione Italiana, published in Milan since 1893. The use of images drew the attention also of those who were little accustomed to reading. Newspapers and magazine brochures and posters encouraged boys to enlist and pushed women, mainly women who had been left alone to manage the household duties, to a greater commitment to the family and to the whole of civil society. There was a huge spread of postcards, fast and cheap means of communication, affordable for everyone and able to reach the adversaries even in the war zones, often far away. The great advantage of the propaganda images was the overcoming of illiteracy. The brief and vivid sentences that accompanied the drawings affected the sensitivity of people and remained impressed on people's minds. A part of propaganda of war was addressed to the enemy. Especially at the front, there were frequent invitations to desert that were addressed to enemy soldiers, both through flyers in their own language and with the use of loudspeakers. These exhortations had a particular effectiveness on Austro-Hungarian soldiers who belonged to the so-called minor nationalities. In fact, among the different nationalities from which the Austro-Hungarian Empire was composed, there were some, for instance Czech, Slovakians, Hungarians, that longed so much for their own independence to join, in some cases, the Entente's armies after the desertion. Censorship. The governments involved in the First World Conflict adopted a weapon of censorship to prevent newspapers to spread false news that went beyond official press releases. The reality and horror of the trenches, the violence of the assaults, the mass carnage simplified by modern technologies, and the use of poisonous gases were hidden. The image they wanted to give was that of a right war, victorious battles of the Italian army, and of heroic exploits for the cause of the homeland. Also, the military and civil mail was subject to strong control. Soldiers, in fact, couldn't reveal to their families the place where they were. They couldn't tell about the privations of the troops in the trenches, the dangers or the mutinies. Envelopes were stamped with a number by the censor, the inner contents inspected, then closed again with a rubber-coated tape, marked verified by the censorship. Cinema. The cinema, an invention of 1895, was becoming very popular in those years, also because it was accessible to all social classes. With the outbreak of war, the Italian film industry realized that the war was a perfect subject for movies. On the other hand, it helped conflict supporters to spread solidarity and sustain to the Italian cause. School. During the war, also school turned into a machine for the patriotic support. In fact, school program was integrated with specific readings and in-depth analysis of history and geography of war zones. The aim was to make children understand what homeland, war and military heroism meant. And then there were different children's magazines, as the Corriere dei Piccoli, that contributed to reinforce the patriotic thrust during the conflict. The stories told in the cartoons had to capture the attention of children and parents alike. The national loan. The war had multiplied the needs of the nation. For years, the productive energies of all belligerent countries were aimed at supporting the war commitment. The war loans were established to face the financial difficulties of the country. So, throughout Italy, many committees were formed to ask citizens to donate their own gold to support the war. All this was accompanied by mass propaganda campaigns with very eloquent posters that incited citizens to subscribe to national loan and donate to the country. In many of the posters, you could see children giving their savings and goods for the supporting of soldiers at the front. Other posters were addressed to the mothers to convince them to sign for the loan.